What would you, as a fellow American citizen, do if you found out your government has been the lying, stealing, crime racketeering organization that they demonize so many of us Americans to be? When will enough be enough for the American people? When will we remind the government it literally doesn't exist without us? Not only do we compromise the working body that enforces the will of the government, but without us, there's no one to rule over anyway. We will always be the power. Remember that.
We always say in the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips, that I am a revolutionary. And you're going to have to keep on saying that. You're going to have to say that I am a proletarian. I am the people. I'm not the pig. You got to make a distinction. And the people are going to have to attack the pig. The people are going to have to stand up against the pig. That's what the Panthers are doing. That's what the Panthers do it all over the world. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips, that I am a revolutionary.
I'm sure we all hate taxes and say to ourselves and others, oh yeah, they suck, but what are you going to do? Or yeah, but we need them for public services. And although I can agree that a tax of sorts most definitely might be needed in some capacity, I absolutely abhor taxes. They're the most vile form of usury that I can even stomach to think of. Another form of financial slavery to keep us all in line. I've never understood the concept of taxes on such large scales, especially after I learned the origins of most of our taxes, which makes my blood boil just thinking about it, so pray for me to make it through a whole video about this. But I came across a document while scrolling X, formerly known as Twitter, that seemed to confirm my beliefs and suspicions about this corrupt organization called the United States federal government. Someone named Aaron Prince uploaded a document titled IRS, a private foreign financial entity. The document argues that the IRS operates as a private financial enforcement mechanism for foreign and corporate interests rather than as a legitimate public revenue service. It claims that the IRS lacks lawful authority, being incorporated in Puerto Rico, and functioning under foreign trust law, and that its operations are tied to private banking interests rather than the U.S. Treasury itself. The text also asserts that the IRS's collection practices are based on fraudulent legal definitions and constructs, effectively converting American citizens into collateral for private debts. I hate legalese, by the way. This comprehensive document exposes the structural fraud perpetrated by the Internal Revenue Service and its financial and legal co-conspirators, including the Federal Reserve, international banking institutions, and bar-licensed attorneys, against the American people. The fraud is not isolated, but systematically entrenched in the conversion of lawful money into private commercial credit, the usurpation of courts by foreign guilds, and the imposition of administrative enforcement. Now, I love stuff like this. The exposure and revelation of truth of how this government has been infiltrated and usurped almost immediately after the victory of the Revolutionary War in 1776. They thought as a country of men they were coming out from under the thumb of the English, but in reality, they would sell the country out to the highest bidder in foreign lands. Now, this document was 44 pages long, and per usual, all sources I use for this video will be listed down below in the description box if you're interested in doing your own research, as you should. The premise of the document is that the organization now operating as the IRS is not a constitutionally authorized agency of the United States government as contemplated under Article 1 or Article 2 of the United States Constitution. You determine if there might be enough evidence to confirm the necessity to investigate the veracity of these claims. As the 16th Amendment states, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any consensus or enumeration. We will start with the history of the IRS and their intended purposes at that time, but real quick, some terms. Law, or the broad overarching legal system, includes statutes, common law, constitutional rules. An act, a single specific statute passed by a legislature. Every act is a law, but not every law is an act. And code, a systemic collection or consolidation of laws and acts covering a specific area, for example, the penal code or tax code. So in summary, an act is passed, becomes a law, and is often organized into a code for easy reference. Now that we have those few terms out of the way, let's get into the history of it. So predating the 16th Amendment was the very short-lived Revenue Act of 1861. The first official federal income tax that was established during the Civil War and was designed as an emergency measure for the Civil War, but was ultimately repealed in 1872 after post-war agitation by economic elites, and after the war's debt was managed. The government returned to a revenue system based on tariffs. While most income taxes were eliminated, taxes on alcohol and tobacco remained enforced. Levying a federal income tax became a key goal for many progressive groups. I have no clue why. The key argument being that it was fairer for wealthy individuals to pay for the taxes and tariffs that had been largely obliged from the middle class and the poor in society. Congress passed the 1894 Wilson-Gorman Tariff Act, which contained an income tax provision of 2% on incomes of over $4,000. In today's dollars, that's equivalent to $151,000. Or approximately a 3,600% increase, meaning prices today are over 37 times higher than in 1894. We're going to leave that alone. Supporters of this new income tax argued that it was not specifically a direct tax, which would require it to be apportioned among the states. Two previous Supreme Court decisions supported these theses, but the 5-4 decision in 1895's Pollock v. Farmers Loan and Trust Co. ruled that the income tax in the act was a direct tax. The core argument was that the income tax in the act was sourced from deriving income from an individual's property. Based on this, the court asserted that direct taxes included any sort of income tax on rents, dividends, and interest, therefore making them legally required to be apportioned among the states. It officially became reinstated by the 16th Amendment in 1913. And when you search through the articles, the United States Code, the statutes at large, this document is correct. There exists no public law establishing the IRS itself as a bureau within the U.S. Department of Treasury. I believe one of the articles that I referenced even gave the example to confirm the veracity of its implied creation isn't true. It's mentioned that it is implied to be created through the creation of the Office of Commissioner of Internal Revenue, like the National Park Service being implied under the Office of Interior. However, the National Park Service does have a law specifically designating it as a lawful arm of the Office of Interior. Every legal department will have even just this simple one line legitimizing its existence. There is no such line anywhere for the IRS in relation to the Treasury Department or any other in relation to finance. I looked through every place I could think of it would reside and found it nowhere. It is simply implied, since the Office of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue was never repealed itself, simply the direct federal income tax. The IRS is still a legal arm of the Treasury Department. Even the OCC-related filings show the IRS is not classified as a sovereign government agency under Title V in the USC, as claimed, but instead as a commercial trust under Title 12 banking regulation, delegating them to fiduciary servicers instead of statutory government officers. And this is just a couple of examples to name a few. But the 16th Amendment was exactly that, an amendment or exception provided. It didn't totally repeal Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. It actually subverted it to allow the federal government to, quote unquote, legally break the law. At their own whim, mind you. That's why your property taxes can be apportioned by your state, but not the federal government. But your income is actually subject to taxation by both state and federal government. A double dipper. Some states have passed an income tax based solely on income levels prior to 1913, but most states adopted income taxes during the 1930s as a response to the Great Depression, which, side note, makes little to no sense to me, as I thought there were no incomes during the Great Depression, so why would we tax something that doesn't even exist for the citizen anyway? Anyway, I've noticed the pattern that the government, be it state or federal, tends to tax or lean on the citizens during times of financial strain, and it should be the other way around. The The government seems to have always been the one on assistance, with their hands out to the American people, and then lies to us about where the proceeds are even going. The abuser gaslighting the abusee. Thankfully, there are some people who are in agreement that the income tax at the federal level should be removed, and have even taken steps and actions to try and repeal this illegal amendment. First introduced in the U.S. Congress in 1999 by former Georgia Congressman John Linder, and then carried by Georgia Congressman Rob Woodall, the fair tax is the leading tax reform movement in the country. It is the only tax system that is simple, efficient, friendly to economic growth, non-discriminatory, unintrusive, and actually fair. H.R. 25, also known as the Fair Tax Act of 2025, was introduced in the House of Representatives on January 3, 2025, and is currently in the first stage of the legislative process. Here is the current status of the bill as of early 2025. It's been introduced, but has not yet passed the House or Senate. The bill was referred to the House Committee on Ways and Means on January 3rd, and the bill proposes to replace federal income taxes, payroll taxes, and estate/gift taxes with a national sales tax, and it calls for the abolition of the Internal Revenue Service itself. Good riddance. This is a reintroduction of the legislation for the 119th Congress, a step that happens frequently within this specific tax proposal. So this is a common way for it to go. It is currently awaiting further action or hearings within the House Committee on Ways and Means. I do also want to point out there were no Democrats who co-sponsored this bill. Just saying. They are in the same bed with all others who are selling out the American people through taxation. The government wants to label and treat us like many corporations or businesses to be traded on the stock market. Then we need to treat them as an able-bodied adult that needs to get out there and start making its own ventures, its own moves, and its own money. The government needs to get some trade agreements going and use tariffs to gain funds to support their own country of children. They should not have their hands in our back pockets trying to pick out every cent and piece of lint. We need to strengthen our individual states to strengthen the country as a whole. They've slowly, through law reform and repeals and legalese, turn the tables and have us serving the American government instead of the other way around, and the government serving the American people. Or even worse, the American government serving a foreign country more than serving the American people. I highly recommend the myth and fact sheet in regard to HR 25 that I've listed and designated out of my sources down below, so it's easier to find and read through. But when it finally hits the House floor, you can't be lied to about what the bill actually is if you go through and read it yourself. Now, this video took me forever to get through as far as research. I had to bookmark and refocus myself so many times to stop from going on side missions. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay updated on what's coming next. Peace.